I'll never forget the night I heard her scream. It cut through the air like a blade, sharp and haunting, echoing through the queen's cold, towering palace. It was Amani's voice, soft-spoken, gentle Amani, now filled with terror. I was just a servant then, blending into the shadows, but I couldn't block out the sound. Everyone froze when it happened, even the guards. The queen stood on her balcony, watching with a cruel smile, as if she enjoyed the fear her punishment brought.
Let this be a warning. No one crosses me and gets away with it.
The scream wasn't just pain. It was the sound of hope breaking. Amani had tried to escape, but the palace was a trap, and the queen was always one step ahead. Amani wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. She came from a small village, nestled by a river, far from the chaos of the queen's kingdom. Even as a child, she was different. While other kids chased birds or played by the water, Amani would sit under the shade of the baobab tree, weaving patterns into leaves or scraps of cloth. Her gift was undeniable. Her creations seemed to come alive. Birds embroidered on fabric looked ready to fly, and sunsets woven into blankets glowed like the real thing. People in the village said she had magic in her hands, but Amani always shrugged it off. She was kind to everyone. If someone's clothes tore, she'd fix them without being asked. If a child was cold, she'd make them a blanket. Amani has a heart as golden as her work, the elders would say. But in a world where kindness shone so brightly, it wasn't long before the wrong people noticed. Amani's life changed the day she found the golden bird. It was after a storm. She'd gone to the river to collect reeds for her weaving when she saw it. A tiny bird with feathers that shimmered like sunlight. Its wing was bent and it couldn't fly. She carried it home, ignoring the whispers of villagers who said it was bad luck. "It's just a bird," she insisted, nursing it back to health. When the bird finally healed, it didn't leave. Instead, it began to sing as she wove, its melody weaving itself into her work. One day, the bird spoke. "You've been kind to me, Amani," it said. "I'll repay you. Your work will become more beautiful than anything the world has ever seen." And it did, but Amani didn't know the price of such a gift. Not yet. Far away, in her cold, golden palace, the queen was growing restless. She had everything: wealth, power, beauty, but it was never enough. She demanded constant praise, but the people whispered about Amani instead. Her spies brought her news of the young weaver. "Her work," they said, "is more beautiful than anything in your collection." The queen's face twisted with jealousy.
Bring her to me. I must see this weaver with my own eyes.
When the queen's guards arrived at Amani's village, the people tried to protect her. "She's just a girl," they said. But the guards didn't care. Amani's parents begged her not to go, but she didn't want anyone else to get hurt. She agreed to leave, her heart heavy with dread. The journey to the queen's palace was long and treacherous. The guards were cruel, forcing Amani to walk for hours without rest. The golden bird flew above her, its song a small comfort in the silence. On the second night, they camped in a dense forest. The shadows seemed alive, and Amani couldn't sleep. An old woman appeared out of nowhere, sitting by the fire.
Be careful, child. The queen's palace is a place of no return.
"Who are you?" Amani asked, but the woman only smiled and vanished into the darkness. The next morning, the group reached a rickety bridge over a deep ravine. As Amani crossed, the ropes creaked and snapped. She barely made it to the other side. "Hurry up!" one of the guards barked, as if her near death meant nothing. The palace was nothing like Amani had imagined. It was beautiful, but cold, every corner filled with gold and mirrors. The queen greeted her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes.
You're the weaver I've heard so much about. Show me what you can do.
Amani was taken to a grand chamber with a golden loom. "Weave me a masterpiece," the queen demanded. "Something that will make me the envy of the world." and don't think about leaving. The palace gates only open when I say so." Amani worked tirelessly, her hands trembling as she wove. The golden bird sang softly, but even its song couldn't calm her fear. She felt the walls closing in, the weight of the queen's gaze pressing down on her. Amani couldn't stay in the palace. She had to get back to her village, to her family. Late one night, she crept through the halls, the golden bird guiding her. She reached the gates, her heart pounding. But before she could open them, the guards appeared. The queen was waiting, her face lit by the moonlight.
Did you really think you could leave? You belong to me now.
The punishment was swift and brutal. Amani was thrown into a dark cell, her hands bound.
You will learn. No one defies me.
Amani sat in the cold, dark cell, her wrists aching from the tight ropes that bound her. Her mind raced with fear and regret. Why had she thought she could escape? The golden bird fluttered to the small barred window, its soft glow lighting up the room. "You must not give up, Amani," it whispered. "How can I not?" she whispered back, tears streaming down her face. "The queen will never let me leave. She'll destroy me." The bird's voice was calm but firm. "She will destroy herself, but you must endure. You are stronger than you think." The next morning, the guards dragged her back to the golden loom. Her punishment was clear. She would weave another masterpiece, this time under constant supervision. The queen wanted something darker, grander, a tapestry that reflected the depth of her power and beauty. As Amani worked, the loom felt heavier, almost alive. Threads seemed to move on their own, and shadows crept along the edges of her vision. The golden bird sang softly, but its song was tinged with sorrow. The queen watched from her throne, her eyes never leaving Amani's trembling hands. Life in the palace was suffocating. The servants avoided Amani, whispering about her behind closed doors. "She's cursed," they said. "The queen's jealousy will destroy her." Amani overheard their words and felt the weight of their truth. The queen's obsession was growing, and it was only a matter of time before it consumed them all. One night, as she worked on the tapestry, a young maid slipped into the chamber. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, her eyes darting to the door. "But I want to help." The maid, whose name was Sira, had grown up hearing stories about the queen's cruelty.
No one survives her wrath. But there's a secret passage in the east wing. If you can reach it, you might escape.
Amani's heart swelled with hope, but the golden bird remained silent, its eyes fixed on the shadows creeping closer to the loom. The queen's obsession with Amani's work deepened. She spent hours in the grand chamber, staring at the half-finished tapestry. Her once beautiful face had grown gaunt, her eyes wild with envy. "She's hiding something," the queen muttered to herself. "Her work is too perfect. It can't be just talent." She began interrogating the palace staff, demanding to know Amani's secrets. Servants were dismissed, guards replaced, and the atmosphere grew even more oppressive. The golden bird warned Amani to be cautious. "She will turn on everyone," it said, "even those who serve her." Amani worked tirelessly, her hands blistered and sore. Each thread she wove felt like a chain, tightening around her, binding her to the queen's madness. Late one night, Amani decided to take Sira's advice. She waited until the palace was silent, then crept through the halls, the golden bird perched on her shoulder. The east wing was eerily quiet, its long corridors lined with faded tapestries. She found the passage hidden behind a loose stone in the wall. It was narrow and dark, the air damp and heavy. "Are you sure about this?" the bird asked, its glow illuminating the path ahead. "I have no choice," Amani whispered. As she made her way through the passage, she heard a faint sound, a soft humming, almost like a lullaby. It grew louder, and the walls seemed to pulse with the rhythm. Suddenly, the passage collapsed behind her, trapping her inside. Amani screamed, but no one heard her. The bird flew ahead, its glow barely piercing the darkness. Keep moving, it urged. There's no turning back now. The passage opened into a vast chamber, its walls covered in mirrors. Each mirror reflected a distorted version of Amani, her face twisted with fear, her hands stained with golden threads. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice echoing unnaturally. The bird didn't answer. Instead, the mirrors began to shift, showing scenes from her life, her village, her family, the queen's cruelty. Then they showed something she didn't recognize, a dark figure standing behind her loom, its hands guiding hers. "Is this the queen's doing?" Amani whispered, but the bird remained silent. The figure in the mirror turned and stared directly at her. Its eyes were empty, and its smile sent a chill down her spine. "You cannot escape," it said, its voice a low growl. Amani ran, her footsteps echoing through the chamber. She didn't stop until she reached another passage, her heart pounding in her chest. Amani emerged from the passage into a dimly lit corridor. The air was cold, and the walls were lined with strange symbols carved into the stone. The golden bird landed on her shoulder, its glow dimmer than before. "This part of the palace is cursed," it whispered. "Few who enter ever return." Amani's pulse quickened. "Why would Sira send me this way?" "Perhaps she didn't know," the bird replied. "Or perhaps she wanted to test your resolve." At the end of the corridor was a door, massive and covered in intricate carvings of snakes and eyes. Amani hesitated, her hand trembling as she reached for the handle. The bird shifted uneasily. "Be careful," it said. The door creaked open, revealing a circular room filled with treasures. Gold coins spilled from chests, jewels glittered in the torchlight, and in the center stood a pedestal holding a small black orb. "What is this place?" Amani asked, stepping inside. "The Queen's secret," the bird replied, "her source of power." As Amani approached the orb, the room seemed to come alive. Shadows stretched and twisted, and whispers filled the air. She reached out to touch the orb, but the bird screeched. "Don't! It's a trap!" Before she could react, the door slammed shut behind her, and the whispers turned to laughter. The laughter grew louder, and Amani spun around, searching for its source. The shadows coalesced into the figure she had seen in the mirrors, a dark, shapeless mass with glowing red eyes. "You cannot escape me," it said, its voice deep and resonant. "You belong to the Queen now." Amani backed away, her heart pounding. "What do you want from me?" The figure laughed. "Your gift, your light. The Queen feeds on it, and so do I." The golden bird flew in front of Amani, its glow intensifying. "You won't take her," it said, its voice fierce. "She is under my protection." The figure hesitated, its form flickering. Amani took the opportunity to run, clutching the bird to her chest. She darted through the treasure-filled room, searching for another exit. The shadows pursued her, their laughter echoing in her ears. "You cannot run from me, little weaver," the figure taunted. Amani found another passage, hidden behind a pile of gold. She squeezed through the narrow opening, the shadows clawing at her heels. The golden bird guided her, its light cutting through the darkness. The passage led to a staircase spiraling upward. Amani climbed as fast as she could, her legs burning with the effort. The whispers followed her, growing louder with each step. "Faster, Amani," the bird urged. She reached the top of the staircase and found herself in a grand hall. The Queen was waiting for her, seated on her throne with a triumphant smile. "I knew you would come," the Queen said, her voice dripping with malice. "You cannot escape me." Amani's knees buckled and she fell to the floor. The Queen rose, her eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction. "You belong to me now, little weaver," she said. The Queen ordered her guards to seize Amani. They dragged her back to the loom, where the half-finished tapestry still glowed with an otherworldly light.
You will finish this. And then you will weave for me until your hands can no longer move.
Amani's heart sank. She looked at the golden bird, its light dim but steady. "What do I do?" she whispered. "You must trust me," the bird replied. As Amani began to weave, the queen watched intently, her greed and envy palpable. The golden threads seemed to pulse with energy, and the room grew darker with each passing moment. The golden bird spoke softly to Amani as she worked. "The queen's power is tied to the tapestry. Finish it, and you can break her hold." "But how?" Amani asked, her hands trembling. "Trust your gift," the bird said. "Weave not just what she desires, but what she fears." Amani took a deep breath and began to weave a new pattern into the tapestry. Images of the queen's cruelty appeared, her greed, her vanity, her emptiness. The threads seemed to fight against her, but she persisted, pouring her heart into the work. The queen's smile faltered as she watched. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Amani didn't answer. The tapestry began to glow, its light growing brighter and brighter until it filled the room. The queen screamed, covering her eyes. The golden light from the tapestry illuminated every corner of the grand hall, revealing the truth the queen had tried to hide. Her reflection appeared on the woven threads, not as the radiant figure she imagined herself to be, but as a haggard, frail woman with hollow eyes. The queen stumbled back, her hands trembling. "What have you done?" she hissed, her voice laced with fear. Amani stood, her resolve hardening. "I wove the truth, Your Majesty. You can no longer hide behind lies." The golden bird perched on Amani's shoulder, its glow intensifying. "Her power is tied to her illusions," it whispered. "Expose her, and she will crumble." The queen screamed, her fury echoing through the hall. "Guards, destroy that tapestry!" The guards hesitated, their faces pale with uncertainty. The glowing tapestry seemed to cast a spell on them, and they faltered, unsure whether to obey. Seizing the moment of confusion, Amani darted toward the hall's massive doors. Her plan was simple: escape the palace, take the tapestry with her, and break the queen's hold over the kingdom. But as she reached for the handle, the doors slammed shut with a deafening thud. "You think you can leave?" the queen shrieked, her voice cracking. She raised her hands, and the shadows in the room began to shift and swirl. "You belong to me, Amani." The guards snapped out of their trance, rushing toward Amani. She clutched the tapestry, her heart pounding. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking, "let me go." One of the guards hesitated, his eyes darting to the queen and then back to Amani. But the queen's piercing glare froze him in place. Amani turned to run, but the shadows wrapped around her ankles, pulling her to the ground. The golden bird fluttered desperately, its light dimming as it tried to free her. The queen approached, her expression triumphant. "You thought you could defy me? No one escapes my palace." The queen ordered Amani to be locked in the tower as punishment for her defiance. The tower was cold and desolate, with only a single window that overlooked the endless forest.
You will stay here until you learn your place.
Amani sat on the stone floor, clutching the golden bird. "What do we do now?" she whispered. The bird nuzzled her hand gently. "This isn't the end, Amani. You still have your gift, and you still have hope." Days turned into weeks, and Amani's hands itched to weave. She tore strips from her gown, fashioning a makeshift loom. Each night, she wove a small piece of cloth, pouring her pain and longing into the threads. One night, the golden bird chirped softly, waking Amani from a restless sleep. "Look," it said, nodding toward the window. A faint glow appeared in the distance, flickering like a beacon. Amani squinted, her heart skipping a beat. "What is that?" "It's the spirit of the forest," the bird explained. "It has not abandoned you." Amani tore her latest weaving from the loom, folding it into her hands. "Can it help us escape?" "Only if you believe," the bird replied. Amani tied the woven cloth around her wrist like a talisman. She closed her eyes, focusing all her energy on the light. The window creaked open, and a gust of wind swirled into the room. The shadows in the tower began to recede, and the golden bird's glow returned. The spirit is answering your call, it said. As the light enveloped the tower, Amani felt herself being lifted into the air. The golden bird flew beside her, guiding her through the darkness. But as she soared toward freedom, a voice echoed in her mind. "You must prove your worth, Amani," the spirit said. "Freedom comes at a price." The scene shifted, and Amani found herself back in her village. It was eerily quiet, the streets empty, and the air thick with unease. "Is this real?" she asked, clutching the bird. The spirit appeared before her, taking the form of an elderly woman with piercing eyes. "This is a test," it said. "You must confront the choices that brought you here." Amani's heart sank as figures from her past emerged, her parents, her neighbors, and the villagers who had once adored her. They stared at her with a mix of hope and disappointment. The spirit gestured toward the villagers. "They trusted you, Amani. They believed in your gift. But did you use it wisely?" Tears welled in Amani's eyes. "I tried to do what was right," she said, her voice trembling. "Then prove it," the spirit said. "Weave a tapestry that shows your true heart." A loom appeared before her, its threads glowing with an otherworldly light. Amani hesitated, her hands hovering over the threads. "You can do this," the bird said softly. Taking a deep breath, Amani began to weave. Images of her childhood appeared, her parents teaching her kindness, her first attempts at weaving, and the joy she brought to her village. But darker images followed, her fear, her doubts, and the pain she endured at the palace. The tapestry shimmered with life, its light growing brighter with each thread. The villagers' faces softened, their expressions shifting to ones of understanding and forgiveness. "You have shown great courage, Amani," the spirit said, "but your journey is not over." The scene dissolved, and Amani found herself back in the palace, standing before the queen. The tapestry floated between them, glowing with an intensity that made the queen shield her eyes. "What is this?" the queen demanded, her voice trembling. "It is the truth," Amani said, her voice steady, "and it cannot be destroyed." The golden bird flew to the tapestry, its light merging with the threads. The palace began to shake, the walls crumbling as the queen's power unraveled. As the palace collapsed, the queen fell to her knees, her beauty and riches fading into nothingness. "What have you done?" she whispered, her voice hollow. Amani stepped forward, her heart filled with both sorrow and relief. "I set us free," she said. The spirit appeared once more, its form radiant and serene. "Your gift was never meant to be a curse, Amani. You have restored balance." The villagers arrived at the ruins, their faces filled with awe and gratitude. They lifted Amani onto their shoulders, celebrating her bravery and resilience. The golden bird perched on her shoulder, its song filling the air. "This is only the beginning," it said. Amani smiled, her heart light for the first time in what felt like years. She had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, her gift shining brighter than ever. And so, her story became a legend, a reminder that even in the face of cruelty and greed, the light of kindness and courage could prevail.
If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and give it a thumbs up to show your support. We'd love to hear your thoughts or lessons you took away from this African tale, so share them in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another enchanting animation story. And feel free to share this video with your friends and family to spread the magic of AI video storytelling.